I'm Mark Ramsey. I'm really pleased to have Gordon Borrell with us today. Gordon is, of course, head of Borrell Associates, a company that specializes in local advertising and local media. And Gordon is also, Gordon's company is the author of a recent report called The Future of Legacy Media. And I'm fascinated by this report, Gordon, and I want to spend some time talking with you about it, and hopefully we'll be able to have some interchange from people as well on Facebook. We've got a Facebook page set up. People are saying they can see and hear us, which is awesome. For you folks on Facebook, the page to go to, by the way, if you're watching this and you want to participate through Facebook, is 22s.com/Mark Ramsey, 22s.com/Mark Ramsey. That will take you to a place where you can add questions and so on. I have about 15-20 minutes worth of questions for Gordon, and at that point I'm much more interested in what you have to say to him. So this is going to be our opportunity to do just that. Thanks to Borrell Associates for doing this. Thanks to All Access for partnering with us on this, and my company, of course, Mark Ramsey Media. Thanks to all of you who are watching right now. So without further ado, welcome Gordon Borrell.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm really looking forward to not only your questions but everybody else's, because this report certainly has generated a lot of buzz.
So it has. Can you give me a sense, relative to the radio industry, of what kind of buzz it has generated?
I found that any time the problem was that the report had the word Pandora in it, and I noticed that whenever you mention Pandora, it sends about 20 people into a stroke who are in the radio industry. And we did mention it in there, and I think the industry is very sensitive. I got to tell you, more so than other media, about what is said about it. And to me, that's a bit curious as a researcher, because researchers should be open to all kinds of criticism and information so you can figure out what's true. But in another sense, I admire it, in that I think traditional media really needs to defend itself heartily, and I see a lot of people just kind of rolling over. So when this report came out, what it said was, I believe the headline was "Radio is treading water," in my mind, because of what's happening in media today. Treading water is pretty damn good. It means you're not drowning. But I think some people in the industry thought treading water wasn't really that good. So, in a nutshell, it evoked a lot of emotion in the radio industry and started the discussion. And discourse can only be good because so much is in change. We all need to kind of educate ourselves and learn what's happening out there so we can help affect that change in our companies in a positive way.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Yeah, flat, as they say, as the expression goes, is the new up in many ways, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Let's back up, though. The name of the report is The Future of Legacy Media. It canvasses all media, not just radio. Why did you do this report?
Good question. We write our reports because we I think, have a pretty good insight into what people are thinking but not saying. It's kind of like a good comedian. They're funny as hell if they say stuff that you're only thinking about but are afraid to say. And I think that the entire industry is wondering, what the hell's going to happen next? We went through almost 20 years now of changes with digital media, particularly since 2008, when everything just had this, wrenching change occur with the Great Recession. And so, everybody's trying to respond to that and to maintain their current level of revenue or to kind of get it back up. And, I don't think many people have time to say, okay, what's going to happen next? What happens in the next 5 years? In the past 5, from 28 to 2013, there were some really big changes that occurred. Pretty much everything, except digital, went down. What's going to happen in the next 5? So that's why we wrote it. Another reason that we took the risk in going out on a limb and saying this is what we think is going to happen is that we have made a lot of pretty crazy predictions, crazy at the time. And it goes all the way back to when we first started the business, predicting that internet advertising would be as big as it is today. And a lot of people were in denial. They said, no, that's never going to happen. We made predictions for recruitment advertising, for automotive advertising, for real estate advertising, what would happen with newspapers, what would happen with Yellow Pages. They were all radical decisions at or predictions at the time. Every single one came true. So we said, okay, let's take that record and see if we can push it out and make some more predictions about what would happen. Unfortunately, I don't think there's anything too radical in here. Maybe a couple little nuances like newspaper ROP advertising or run-of-paper advertising going back up. But there's nothing particularly radical except just a couple of things.
Well, let's talk about that, because I guess one of the issues in the radio space is that there's a lot of stuff that people don't like to talk about, and my attitude is if we can talk about the uncomfortable things, then we can make better plans for the future based on the reality of the marketplace as it presents itself to us. One of the statistics that you have in here very early on, when you say the future ain't what it used to be, you project, or you indicate minutes listened to radio from 2008 to 2013, projection to 2013, and then a projection on to 2018. And the stats you have are 124 minutes per day in 2008, down to 93.5 per day in 2013, projected to go down to 81.9 per day by 2018. That's a decline from 2008 to 2018, 10 years, of 34%, one-third in terms of time. Now, the often quoted statistics by Nielsen are that almost, let's round, that almost everybody listens to radio. What you're talking about is something else. You're not talking about the reach. You're talking about the intensity of consumption, and you're projecting that to be off by a third between 2008 and 2018, correct?
You're correct, and we're looking at, and we can get bogged down in arguing what the actual number will be and whether changes in, what Arbitron did has affected anything. But what I think you have to do is just kind of step back, not defend the industry, but step back and look at it at face value and say, ooh, the trend is down. Can we really argue with that realistically? Our forecast is that radio will lose another 11 minutes per day between now and 2018. Is it going to be 12 or 15? I don't know. Is it going to be 9 or 8? But it's going to go down. And let me make sure we're clear on that. That's terrestrial radio. That's listening to a radio station at, on a radio. Some of that moves over to streaming. So, it's mitigated a bit by that because people like me will go on to 106.9, the Fox, my favorite station in town here, and listen to it on a computer or on a mobile device. So when we say terrestrial radio, that's exactly what we mean. There is a shift toward this streaming, just as we see a shift toward reading local news on the web or watching local news from television stations. Television, by the way, declines 15 minutes a day. That's broadcast TV between now and 2018. Newspaper readership goes down about 5 minutes per day, which is really critical to them because they're only now about 15 or maybe 20 minutes a day that people spend reading the newspaper. So across the board, we see this shift from analog to digital media. The more important thing, Mark, and one of the radical, I think, predictions in there, and that I don't think it's anything anybody's paying attention to, is, and this is the big one, between now and 2018, there's going to be a significant decline, 20 minutes a day, in total media usage. That's pretty significant.
Where's that going?
It's going to greater efficiency, and you have to really think about this. We've spent, the past 20 years with all this digital media stuff, surfing and checking stuff out, and figuring out how Facebook works and what the etiquette is on Twitter, and whether one streaming site is better than another, and how to manipulate things. And that time is pretty much coming to an end. And people have figured out how to do stuff. They've figured out that email consumes 3 or 4 hours a day of their time. So they figured out all these filters, and the time that they spend with media is getting compressed and compressed and compressed, with simple things like, I'm going to record CSI and zip through the commercials. Instead of spending 30 minutes in front of the television, I'm going to spend 22. So those types of things that are occurring, and it's incumbent on any media company, radio stations, and any others to say, wow, people are settling into a much more efficient use. We've got to be really careful with what we're providing. Let's not waste people's time.
Okay, I've got a ton of questions for you related to that, but I just want to take a step back because with the statistics we talked about, the 34%, in the first table of your report on page 5, It does suggest, I mean, if I'm reading this right, under radio, there is a postscript, a note that says, under radio, it includes Pandora, Apple, and other competitors. So doesn't that suggest that you said it was just radio on the radio? This suggests that it includes all the
Well,
streaming.
yeah, the numbers in the report in that particular table, yes, include all time spent listening to radio, and it is again getting shorter and shorter. What I was referring to was that when you look at terrestrial radio and listening to radio stations, say in a car, maybe in a kitchen, or the box that I have here that I listen to when I turn on the radio.
30 years.
I'm going to get that now off of streaming. So terrestrial radio declines a little bit faster than the streaming portion of it.
Okay. So what we're talking about really is an erosion of attention across many of these media, a lot of it flowing to the digital side. And I wonder to what degree is radio losing that attention to streaming alternatives, and to what degree is it simply losing attention to other things, other shiny baubles that compete for the attention of consumers?
Well, I don't know the answer statistically or empirically to that, but it stands to reason that because we live in such a distracted society, I am sure that the people listening to this broadcast right now are also checking their email and getting text messages. And I'm sure that some, might even be driving down the road and watching this and checking their text messages and driving like they're drunk. The attention span of people is just really, really short because of all this multitasking. Mm-hmm. And we think that that's pretty much come to a head, and it's going to decline and decline, and people will settle in on things that save them time and save them money. And if you don't fit into those categories, you're going to be in a little bit of a trouble, except for entertainment, of course. There is a time at which people just like to kind of listen to stuff. So, to answer your question, it is being lost to a degree to streaming, because streaming has greater capabilities than just listening to the radio. You can actually interact with it in a number of cases and see the artist that's on and enter a contest right there on the screen, or manipulate a playlist if you're on something like Pandora. And it does, it does lose some time and attention to, simple things like phone calls. Everybody's got a cell phone now. They didn't 20 years ago. And in the car, they turn off the radio and they make a phone call. Lots and lots of little things are chipping away at people's time. And again, it's incumbent on any medium, radio included, to try to figure out how to make things much more efficient and practical for people using all this new technology.
Let's talk about that for a sec, because I think the million-dollar question, the multi-million-dollar question, is what does the broadcaster do about this? What does the broadcaster do in the presence of this trend? Read a certain way, you could take a look at this decline of 34% from 2008 to 2018 and view it with some degree of fatalism. So my question to you is, what are the broadcasters supposed to do about this? There's this sense that it's as simple as having our products available in more places, having our stream available, getting more people to come to our radio station, trying harder, having an app that's available in a new dashboard. But is that correct? I mean, what are broadcasters supposed to do to deal with these trends?
That is the big question, and I'm really, really glad you asked it. It's kind of a tough one, because today there are so many opportunities. We see a lot of companies drowning in opportunities. What I would do if I were GM of, say, a cluster of a group of stations in the marketplace, or a market manager, is step back and look at the assets. I can get really, really excited about radio when I look at the assets. It is the only medium in the marketplace that has, an incredible amount of creativity to it. You look at newspapers, and I come from the newspaper industry. I was a reporter and an editor for years. Newspapers are kind of bland. They're kind of textbookish. They're obituaries and a couple of feature articles and maybe some recipes and things like that. You look at television, and they're a bit more glitzy, but they kind of have better hair and dress better than all of us. They got $3,000 suits, so I can't kind of relate to them. I can sure as hell relate to radio and the stations I listen to, and Mike Arlo, who's been in the business, local DJ at the classic rock station here, who's been in the business since I've been in the business, since the mid-'70s. So take a look at that creativity, and take a look at the ability to connect with the people, and then look at all the tools that are available. So if you look at your creativity and say, what can I do better than newspapers and better than TV, and for God's sakes, better than the Yellow Pages and Direct Mail, all these companies that rely on advertising, and then begin to produce products. So here's what I think I would do. First off, there's one way I firmly believe that you can filter out all the other crap that looks like shiny new objects that we got to do this new app over here and that new app and do this and do that. Before you know it, you're down a rat hole and you've spent, what little money you have to experiment with. First, determine a financial goal. What is what is the goal for your radio station for selling local spots, and what is the goal for selling digital? Get real aggressive on digital, because there's a lot of money out there. And we can tell you how much money is out there. Just go to BorrellAssociates.com/DMR for digital marketing region. Pick your region, and it'll tell you how much is spent in digital advertising in that market. And multiply that by whatever share you want. You can't probably get any more than maybe 10 or 15% share, but just say a 2% share or a 5% share, and you'll see what's available to you. Once you know that money is available, then you should get really excited about what the opportunities are. In other words, don't just do things that are cool. Do things that have revenue associated with them. Here's what I do. I'd build up the email list. You can use the promotional capability of your station to significantly build up email list. Barack Obama did this in his campaign. You couldn't get into his website unless you gave him an email address. And he used those email addresses to solicit funds, to get volunteers. If you go to, my kids like to listen to Hot 100.5, which is in the Hampton Roads Marketplace. Go to that station, and they'll let you get in. But the first thing they want from you is your email address. And they're collecting more and more email addresses. Stations don't do enough of this. People are 40% more likely to check their email than they are go to the web to do something. I think how often you're checking your email. And look at all the offers and great stuff that comes to you by email. You might only spend 4 or 5 seconds with it. So it's important that you provide emails that provide some type of value to people. But that's one big one, is build up those email lists, segment them, and try to either get advertising in front of those people or sell those people something. That's a big one. I think that there is greater value in the stream, and this is a troublesome one to me. We survey every year for the RAB, and we're doing a benchmarking report right now for them. And I was just looking at the data. Local sales reps do not value the stream as much as they value the terrestrial radio commercial spots. And let me tell you, that's switching over. We've already seen that. So place more value in the stream, do more and different things in the stream. Don't just go, okay, we'll just simulcast, that's it. Have some contests, get people over there, do some really cool and interesting things that are stream specific, and begin raising those CPMs. I think that's really important. Don't just say, oh, that's less value than the terrestrial spots. Promotions, there's so much migration, and Mark, I could talk all day about this. The lines cross from what advertisers are spending in classic advertising to what they're spending in promotions. In 2007, this is a little known fact, and the amount that they spend on promotions has zoomed upward. They're spending, a little bit more on advertising. They're spending a lot more in promotions. And who knows promotions better than radio? Do you hear what I'm telling you? It's all about promotion. And radio knows it so much better than everybody else. And all this digital stuff plays into promotions so damn well. I got a million more ideas, but that's how I would start.
Well, and I've been taking furious notes because I want to interject on a couple of these things. Let me go back. With regard to email lists, there's a difference, you would agree, between an email list that is purely essentially a contest entry form, right? A fan club that's all about contests and people who want to play them, and a list that is the first step to building the relationship with the tens or hundreds of thousands of people who listen to your brand, right? My observation is the stations have this all mixed up, that in fact, there's very little effort to gather email unless you're interested in a contest. We know that a 2, 3, 4% of a station's cume is interested in a contest, yet that's the only place we devote the effort to gathering their email address. Is that your observation too?
Yeah, you can start out generally with getting an email address that, people want concert updates, or want to know some programming changes
Value. You're
or
talking
something.
about value.
Yeah, yeah, and then you have to begin building the value. Getting little bits. Yahoo did this great, and it was probably when Seth Godin was there, 20 years ago. It was, let me have your email address because you need an email, right? And now, are you interested in golf? No. Okay, that's fine. You know something about the person. Are you interested in, baby clothing? Yes. Okay. We'll send you values or coupons and on that. Are you interested in travel? It would just ping you, and it would find out if you were male. It would find out whether you were female or whether your zip code was this or that. And over time, Yahoo learned more and more about you. I'll tell you, somebody who's doing the same thing is Groupon. Say what you will about Groupon or Living Social and these deals, but they're in everybody's market, culling the email addresses not of radio listeners, but of people who buy stuff. And that's really, and they know what these people buy, whether it's wireless speakers or a golf outing or roof repair guy or something like that. The big competitor in this space is not Groupon as much as it is now Angie's List. So if we can begin thinking less like mass media people and more like niche media people and more like marketers, and say, how can we collect valuable audiences, not a massive audience? And I think that's one of the biggest messages of this report, Mark, is that the massive audience is not as important. It's still important, but not as important anymore with all this targeting capability. It's that one little niche. We said in the report that if you look at television, you look at radio, who have these massive audiences, and the dollars that advertisers spend to reach those audiences per minute of usage, guess what the biggest medium of all is? It's the yellow pages, where advertisers spend over 18, almost $19 million per adult usage minute, compared with about $1 million per adult usage minute for television and about $500,000 for radio. It's the intent of the user, and you've got to keep honing that user down to find out what their intent or their needs are, because that's where the advertiser wants to spend their money, when someone's wallet ready.
What fascinates me about your answer is that no part of this answer dealt with let's put the radio station in more places, or let's sell ads better, or let's sell more ads. It didn't have to do with that at all. You're really talking about reconceptualizing your business as one designed to connect consumers with advertisers in the presence of this trusted brand through all the powerful tools of this brand, enabled in part by the digital age.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain that pretty much all media, you can argue the nuances whether something's going to go up a little or down a little over the next 4 or 5 years. I'm fairly certain that all analog media will pretty much be flat or down over the next several years. And it's happened. Don't strangle me because I'm giving you this message. It's happened over time. Radio did it to newspapers in the 1920s. It took newspapers' growth away when it came along, and television did it to radio in the 1950s. So here comes digital media. It's fun if you look at it differently, and that is as an opportunity as opposed to a competitive threat. How can you seize this new opportunity to compete with everybody else in the marketplace? Take this as an example. 20 years ago, radio had no business being in the classified advertising business. Some of them tried in small markets. They would read, classified ads over the air. That kind of sucked. They had no business competing with television and running television commercials. There was no outlet for it. They had no business getting in the directory business. Print cost a lot of money, and it wasn't their business. But they can do all of those today. You can be in the directory business online without the cost of delivery. You can be in the video business and go after television's huge dollars in automotive advertising from dealer associations by selling video spots. You can go after newspaper classifieds. So if you look at it differently and say, how do we use this new medium to create a completely new business for ourselves? Not some huge business you're going to have to invest a lot in, but maybe incrementally start a couple of things and track the growth of it. I think that's what the most successful stations are going to do.
Going back to you made reference to Godin when he was at Yahoo, probably contributed them building the email list. I wanted to mention to you that once when I was speaking with Seth, he asked me the question. He said, you know, if every radio station had several years ago when we first started talking, built up their listener database through email, you know what they would have right now? And I said, what, Seth? And he said, Groupon, which is really quite true.
I would believe it, and that's a great point. Years ago, broadcast did not know who their audience were. They just knew it reached 80 or 90 or 95% of the people out there, but they didn't have names and addresses. What a great way to begin getting them.
Here's the other thing that strikes me from what you're talking about is that, you know, normally we think of content and talent as what happens on the air. What you're describing is a lot of content and a lot of talent that happens within the four walls, has nothing to do with the air. In fact, you're redefining content away from or broader than what happens on the air to include everything that the radio brand creates across all platforms. All of that is content with a seat at the table of revenue generation, correct?
It is, and the big challenge, not just for radio, but for anybody, is to understand what all of this disruption does to an incumbent business, an existing business. And that is, it's going to be really difficult for existing radio management, and this is the big challenge. It's going to be really difficult for existing radio management to build something that is not incremental. And incremental is okay, but if you want to be radical and start building some really great things, you're going to have to recruit talent from outside the station. I know a number of stations, groups, that have recruited people from the newspaper industry or from the Yellow Pages industry. These guys know a lot, and they don't know about radio, and they don't need to know about radio because you already do. So if you can recruit somebody from outside the industry, or maybe a group of people that will help you understand the new medium and all of its capabilities and say, why not? And challenge you on a couple of things, I think you get much farther along because they understand really different nuances from different media that you kind of don't because you're in the radio business, and they're going to help really bring you along a lot faster.
Let's talk about streaming for a second. You have a line in your report. It says, online radio, especially among younger listeners, a trend the radio industry has largely chosen to ignore. And then you go on to say online radio penetration by services like Pandora and Apple reach almost a third of all adults under 30 and more than a quarter of all adults under 40. Is that too harsh, do you think, or not harsh enough, a trend that radio has largely chosen to ignore?
Some of this is worded to grab you by the collar and shake you and get you moving. And radio, you know, all media needs that. So unfortunately, the history has been, and I hate to say this, you know, the history has been that radio will attempt something in digital and retrench from it because of a myriad of reasons, mostly because the industry is owned by, you know, public companies or by private investors that want to preserve the margin and don't want to put too much into a new medium. And we've seen it happen time and again. So largely ignore, I think, is a trend that we have seen in the past. And when you look at the streaming that a lot of stations do, and they do, whether it's through a mobile device or iHeartRadio or their own streams on their own website, it's done. But I got to tell you, when I look at the surveys, it's done in, I don't want to say a half-hearted way, maybe more of an obligation. And when you see what the GSMs think of the value of that stream, it's just nothing. It's like they don't really value it. So I do worry about that internal mentality, and we're going to see more of this. Here's a warning. I do think that now that the economy is improving, revenues appear to be coming back. You know, there'll be a little more political advertising out there to bolster things, and car sales look really good this year. A lot of people are going to lose sight of this digital stuff, and they say, I told you not to worry about it. It hasn't killed our business. And they're going to they're not going to die as a result of that mentality, but they're not going to grow again. And that's my biggest concern. Radio will stay flat if it doesn't figure out how to seize all this stuff. They're not going to die. That's important. Radio's not, I don't think any medium is going to die. Maybe Yellow Pages guys. But I think if a radio company wants to grow revenues again beyond maybe 1 or 2 points per year, then it's going to have to put some significant investment into these digital operations and be a lot more creative with them.
So in other words, when you project flat from now to 2018, that's not as much a fatalistic projection as it is a warning about the consequences of not rising to the challenge.
Yeah, look, local spot we think is going to be up 2 to 3% over the next couple of years, and that's great. National might be flat, network might be flat, but you know who could be happy with flat? Yeah, if for people who say flat is a new up, you should just slap them. You know, it
I
just
think I said that at the beginning, so
yeah.
I,
I'm sorry.
I
Uh, no, but you shouldn't be satisfied with
Mhm.
that. You know, if you want to be complacent, that's fine. But I have never known radio to be complacent. Radio is such an avid cheerleader for their medium. Take and channel some of that energy. And it's not that radio isn't. There are many companies out there that I think are doing some great things, but there are also an awful lot out there that, like I said, seem to have retrenched quite a bit on this. One more thing about streaming is that if we go back to that one question, is radio not likely to kind of seize this streaming opportunity? When you look at all the advertising spent in digital, all the money that advertisers are spending on all this digital crap out there to meet customers and do business, about that much, if you can measure it, is in audio streaming commercials. Yet that's about a third of all radio station digital revenues. And it's because that's the medium that radio understands. It's audio, and it looks like radio, so I'm going to put a $5 spot over here. And the more you do it, the more it kind of erodes your core product. There is greater value right now in the terrestrial commercial spot than there is in the streaming spot. It's the same conundrum that newspapers faced when they're trying to convert people over to the web. The revenue that newspapers get on the web per reader is about 1/10 of what they get over here. So a print reader is worth 10 times more than a digital reader. I don't know what the ratio is with a terrestrial radio listener than a online streaming listener. It's probably about the same. So I'd be really careful to spend so much time in concentrating on that stream. It's important. The dollars are very small, and in the scheme of things, there really aren't that many advertisers out there saying, oh, please give me a spot in the radio stream. I'm going to make a lot of business off of that. They're buying these other products out there.
Let me just take a moment, a pause, so that everyone understands what we're doing here. I'm Mark Ramsey. I'm talking with Gordon Borrell from Borrell Associates. We're talking about his recent report, The Future of Legacy Media, specifically the radio implications. If you have a question that you want to submit for Gordon, you can do that at the following place. And you can still watch the video while you're doing it. It's 22s.com/Mark Ramsey. 22s.com/Mark Ramsey. One last question about streaming before we move on. That's only a portion of the pie. What is the next layer out from that that's available? So in other words, if I have the stream, I have real estate, I have clickable real estate, I have click-through opportunities and so on. I have the entire model that's available to Pandora, for example. That's not chicken feed, right?
Well, they're banner ads and they're sponsorship, advertising. More and more, we're finding that targeted banners and video are the spots that people are looking for, and something that's really interactive. It might include a text messaging, promotion, and it might include other types of couponing and things like that. So it's really kind of hard to put a finger on it. So if we look at it by format and say there are really 4 formats in digital, it would be banner ads, and it includes mobile. Banner ads and sponsorship or display advertising, targeted banners, and audio advertising, paid search, and video advertising. The highest growth categories, phenomenal growth categories, are video and targeted banners. So just throwing a banner up on a website or on a mobile device really doesn't do it anymore, and it's the whole movement of the industry toward targeted or specific advertising, looking at what the user's intent is. So if they can get a banner ad on a group of people, I was with a broadcast group back in November, and they had a whole bunch of agencies, and I spoke, and then after I spoke, they got up and they said, hey, we know that last week in this market there were 5,600 people looking for a Ford F-150. And all the people who represented dealerships, sat up and paid attention. And they said, here's how we know. We tracked via cookies or registration or whatever method it was. And these are people who actually went and searched for Ford F-150. They also went over here to a sports site, or they also went over here to a home health care site, or places where you wouldn't expect to see people looking for that type of vehicle. So the format changes beyond just the audio commercials are moving toward these targeted banner advertisements, even the targeted video spots that we're seeing on YouTube right now. Go onto YouTube and watch some goofy ass videos of, a cat, batting around a dog or whatever. Laughing baby, funny, gorilla videos. And if you watch 3 or 4 of them, you'll begin to see local spots pop up, anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds. Those are your customers. You can sell into that stream, and you need to begin to looking at that as opportunities to sell advertising to these folks that don't include your station website and don't include your stream. You have the right to do that, because after all, what you're doing is helping people sell stuff in the community. You might think you're creating great programming for people to listen to, great entertainment, but your station isn't worth squat unless you help people sell stuff. And it's not just your station now that you have the opportunity to do that. You have all this digital media at your disposal. Go and do that.
Where does content come into play here? And here I'm talking not, I recognize that there are layers of content outside of what's on the air, but are we assuming that a sports radio station, a talk radio station, a news radio station is the same problem as an all-music radio station?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think that the big challenge is this, that the content, and this is so tough, the content that advertisers want to attach themselves is not sports content per se, or entertainment content, hip-hop formats or things like that. It's the content where people are actually looking to buy stuff. And that's a really tough message. Let me explain that. The top revenue getter last year, or in 2012 I guess it was Autotrader.com, over $1 billion. And that was just people looking to buy cars. Also at the top of the list were YellowPages.com. And that's people looking up stuff before they buy it. And up there was Groupon and Craigslist and all these, and eBay. And think about those. They're the ones getting all the money. Why? Because advertisers want to be around people before they buy something. So the conundrum is, oh, crap, I've got a local sports station, ESPN station, or a talk radio station. Gordon's saying that's not the content that people want to be around. What you do have, though, is you have audience. And what you really, I think, need to look at is, instead of leveraging the content that you have and sort of putting it over here online by streaming it or putting it into words on a website, which might erode the audience, is how can you use that promotional capability of the station to, get user information or drive more listeners or viewers or whatever, and then get that information and then market to them specifically. So I think one of the key values that any station has is its promotional capability, not so much its content. How do you use the promotional capability of that on-air reach that you have to drive something else to happen, whether it's an advertiser's commercial or whether it's people to register for a contest where you're giving away LASIK surgery, where all the people who enter enter that contest are going to be interested in LASIK surgery. What a wonderful lead data list that you have there. So content, I don't think translates well over to the web or to all this digital stuff, as well as your ability to promote and drive audience information and databases of information.
Now, you would agree, though, that while that may be true, ultimately the content is what continues to give, presumably, a radio brand over the air a competitive advantage over streaming alternatives that can copy their music verbatim. What they have is everything else. So in other words, there still has to be a reason to support the scale of the brand in a media space. Do you follow my point?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I have satellite radio in my vehicles, and I can listen to 80s music or 70s music, and as opposed to listening to the local station. And I find myself rarely doing that. Why? And the reason is I feel a little more connected with the announcers, and what's going on. It's kind of cool. I get information I didn't expect, and maybe they could replicate that on satellite, but they can't tell me how crazy it is that in Williamsburg, Virginia right now, and the sun is still out, they're closing the frickin' schools because snow might come this afternoon, and they're having a discussion about that, and that's hilarious. And so driving to work takes me about 40 minutes a day, and I listen to local stations. I drove up and back over the weekend to Cape May, New Jersey, to visit my mother. We had the radio on the whole time. We were just kept hitting the dial trying to get the station, that would come in. Why did we do that instead of listening to satellite? It's the connection with the community, and that's the content that I think it's important. It's not so much the music. That's kind of interesting, but it's that banter and that connection that's kind of cool. And like I said, other media don't have that. Television doesn't have it. Newspapers don't have it. That community connection is so valuable. It's why community newspapers, not the big metros, but the community newspapers are still really strong. That 5,000 or 10,000 circulation newspaper is the voice of the community. Radio stations are the voice of the community as well in certain niches of it. And that's really powerful. If you can find a way to leverage that to build up customer lists and build up other relationships, that's incredibly valuable.
It's really all about the relationships ultimately, isn't it?
It is.
Now, you're talking about something that's particularly local, but it doesn't need to be specifically local, does it? What if it's unique? What if it's outstanding? What if it's, what if Howard Stern tomorrow were to be back on terrestrial radio? Would that not be something that is every bit as good as uniquely local content?
It would. You're talking about national programming, and I'm a little bit disconnected from that because our clients, what we try to do is provide information for them that they can go out and sell at the local level. So you do out and sell local advertisers into Howard Stern. Bad example. So I'm floundering here because I'm thinking, I'm really more interested in talking about what builds value for a local advertiser, what they want to connect to. So national content is good. Rush Limbaugh, there are advertisers that will want to be around that. I'm looking at what a station could do creatively, locally, to morph into something a bit different or in addition to radio, and using this new medium to seize the opportunity.
Okay. In your report, you indicate that 60% of radio listening is in cars. That's a huge proportion. That's widely discussed in the industry right now, as you know, because it's under attack by all the other mechanisms that get into our cars now and increasingly going forward. Yet it's interesting to me that we really haven't touched on that yet, and I wonder, to what degree do you see solutions that can solve this riddle that will appear in cars that will be accessible to broadcasters, and to what degree will it continue to be a promotional problem, a promotional opportunity for broadcasters to drive people across other platforms?
That's a tough one, and I think one that people are almost afraid to address, because the momentum there is going to be to put more and more outlets for wireless devices in vehicles, and it does detract from the dashboard and the radios. It gives people more options.
Right.
And so I think that's inevitable. I don't think they'll take radios out of cars. I just maybe not in our lifetime, certainly not in the next 5 years. I just don't think that's going to happen, and if it did, it would be such a tragedy. I think that better yet, and I do like this movement, as odd as it sounds, Jeff Schmillian's effort to activate the FM chips in cell phones. I think that's really cool, and I think that's an initiative that the entire industry should be behind. But inevitably, as we said when we started out, I think there's just greater and greater competition, and you have to face it. All media is facing it. Radio better face it at some point. There is just more and more and more competition for people's times. And if our predictions are true, over the next 5 years, people are going to start cutting back more on the total time that they spend with media, which means they're only going to put their most valuable time with the most valuable media. So you better really make what you have on your station, what you have on your website, and the communications you've created on Facebook channels and Twitter channels and email channels with people very efficient and very valuable. The car, is going to have more and more media outlets associated with it, televisions probably, and YouTube and things like that, and it's going to cause people to turn off or turn down their radio. I think you just have to face that. At some point it'll happen. Put more compelling content out there so to make it harder for them to turn it off. Even though I have satellite, like I said, I still listen to radio almost all the time. So keep that content compelling.
Good. I want to take an opportunity to ask some of the questions that are queuing up on Facebook. By the way, the place to do that, guys, is 22s.com/Mark Ramsey. That will take you to a spot on Facebook. Yes, you have to click like the page. Give me a break. Just do it. And then you'll be dropped into the slot so you can ask some questions. Here's one from Dick Taylor. What's more important to the future of radio, HD or streaming? Does amplitude modulation have a future? I think that's a reference to AM.
Yeah. AM has a future, and I had no idea what the hell it is. It's odd. There's a great book. I have it over there somewhere. It's called Tube of Plenty, and if you Google it, you can find it on Amazon, I'm sure. And it's all about the history of television, but it starts out with radio. And you get about halfway through that book, and you'll be able to predict the future of broadcast radio in particular. I don't know what it will be for AM. And so I really kind of don't know how to answer that question. I think that you'll see AM turn into something else. Somebody will find a way to make it useful beyond, local churches and some screaming far right or far left groups. But I think it all moves to, I'll tell you this. People often ask us, what's going to happen? Is this going to survive? Is that going to survive? And I think we can predict pretty accurately 3 years out, a little less accurately 5 years out. Beyond that, you don't know. But science fiction is a good predictor of the future, and I don't see anybody in Star Trek listening to the radio or watching it, watching a television set or reading a newspaper. So follow the trends for that. Stuff is going to go away. Everything will become digital. Probably not in our lifetime. But if you can follow the trend and accurately predict when those transitions will occur, then I think you can get somewhere. That was a long-winded answer to say I don't know.
So then the challenge, though, is to kind of recognize that at that point of that digital transition, the way you look then is going to be different from the way you look now. With the four corners of your business model then is going to be different from the four corners of your business model now. Just as a book is different from a movie is different from a play, so is an over-the-air radio station different from the manifestation of radio you've just described across platforms going forward, correct?
Absolutely. There's one other challenge in that, Mark, and that is that the life cycle of certain businesses or opportunities, more accurately, is really short. There's a great article in Harvard Business Review, I think it was a year or two ago, called Jumping the S-Curve, and it describes these life cycles where a business will grow or a business opportunity will grow like this and then go down. And it's typically because of technology. Technology is, speeds are increasing and capabilities are vastly increasing and price is compressing. So in that scenario, disruptors sort of come up and do things better and different every 18 or 24 months. So what that means is that if you want your business to grow in net, you can't ride one curve. You have to ride one curve and then create another one and watch it go up and another one and watch it go up. And that's a challenge in legacy media businesses because we've been accustomed to riding a business opportunity for decades. Right. So as these new ones come along, you really do need to say, well, that one worked for a short while, now we're going to move on to this. So we're going to maintain that and ride it down to a certain point. That's a big challenge in legacy media.
Here's a question from Joel Denver. With digital media able to demonstrate so much specific absolute use, and in such a granular manner, why do marketers continue to pay less for it than traditional media, and when do you see that tipping point occurring, if it will?
That's a great question. The reason that they're paying less for it is it's so damn competitive. Everybody's got something, and it doesn't really cost a lot to maintain it. It's not like you create a newspaper or a magazine and you have the cost, the variable costs of all the newsprint or the glossy paper and delivery costs and things like that. Hell, you can create, my kids can create a video program and edit it themselves and put it up on YouTube, and hell, what's the cost? There's really no cost at all. So you see people willing to start stuff out for free, and I think that's always going to occur. Now, the tipping point will be this, and I think this is interesting. This is just my opinion, but it makes a lot of sense if you think about it, and that is, I think we're in a medium where, because there is no barrier to entry or a very, very low cost to entry, unlike radio, where the barrier to entry is an FCC license, or television, or newspapers, where the barrier to entry is a multi-million-dollar printing press. Any fool can get into this digital media business, right? So where there's no barrier to entry, the only competitive advantage becomes size. I can start naming things, and you will think of a company that sort of pops into your head for each of these, and it's the number one. Where do you go for search? Where do you go to buy books? Where do you go for classifieds? Where do you go to download music? A name popped up in your head, and it's the number one. So the challenge is, with the price being compressed, to create something that is so big and so massive, it's the number one something in your local market. That's where the advertisers will migrate, and that's where all the price advantage is. Everybody else will be a distant second and struggling and offering lower and lower CPMs, but guess what? Their crap won't work. So if you can take that business mentality and say, okay, whatever it is that we create, we got to be the best at. I think that's really, really important, because there's really not much room for a number two in the marketplace. At least the advertisers aren't going to be fooled by all those others trying to do the same thing but don't have the scale that you have.
Couple of final questions. Here's one from Chris Baker. I don't think our sales departments have a strong enough digital brand or presence. Not everything in the digital plans on the radio station has to center around the brand of the station. I think we need to focus on thinking like marketers. Do you think that radio stations have put enough emphasis on their sales departments utilizing digital opportunities to grow their effectiveness? And if not, how would you improve that?
Well, it's tough for me to say no, they haven't put enough emphasis on it. I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. And why it's tough for me to say no is it's a decision market to market. If I were a market manager for a radio cluster, the very, very first thing that I would want to do is to make sure I sold as much radio advertising as I could and I was number one in the marketplace. Screw the digital stuff. I want to make sure I nail that. Once I have that down, because that's 95% of my revenue and 100% almost of my profits. Once I have that, if I don't nail that and I begin to let that slip, I'm going to screw up everything else. So that's really important. So those stations that cannot juggle two plates, they should be juggling that one really, really well, spinning that plate really well. So obviously they should be doing it anyway. If they are doing it, then I would say that you really do need to take a very close look at digital. That's where the growth is. That's where advertisers want to spend their money. The challenge is this for radio, is they haven't done a really good job, and a lot of other media haven't as well, so they're kind of in the same company as television and some newspapers to a great extent, in that what a lot of them do, I remember one big radio company coming to me and saying, damn, there's no money here. Of all these people we're going to sell digital stuff to, these auto dealers and these furniture stores and the others, they're not spending any money with us. They're hardly spending anything. And the reason, as we found out, was that they were talking to the people who were buying radio, and they weren't the people in the company also buying digital. And when their salespeople were trained really, really well, these are the radio reps, trained really, really well to sell digital, and almost forced that radio buyer to buy digital, guess where the digital money came from? The radio budget! Do you hear what I'm telling you? Not good. So that's why we've always said, boy, you need to have digital-only sellers, or at least have your radio reps ask the question, who's buying digital for you guys? And the radio buyer's probably going to say, I don't know. You're going to have to go talk to those tech guys over there. So it's a weird little nuance to say, yeah, radio's not doing that well selling digital, because they're trying to sell to the radio buyers, and typically it's the tech guys at the auto dealership that are buying literally hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Google advertising because it looks like a tech buy to them. So you gotta keep that in mind. No, a traditional media sales rep will be able to get a significant share of digital advertising in your market. They'll be able to get some, and they should be trained to sell it. But if you want to get a significant share of digital advertising, you're going to have these digital-only reps. I'm sorry to tell you, you have to have them.
Final question, and then I want to give you an opportunity to talk about how to get the report and the conference and so on. Career advice. A lot of people working in and around the radio industry, sellers, on the air, programmers, management. What advice would you give to people who want this to be a career, who want to spend another 5 to 10 or more years in it?
A lot of money being made in selling thermal pane windows right now. Now,
don't leave on that note.
Being in any media company right now is really exciting. As I tell people, I tell my kids, it's a great time to be smart. It really is. It kind of reminds me of the scene of the bar scene in Star Wars. You know, there's the Jedi, and then there's all these other people. Things are moving so fast. Technology is, the pace of it is just incredible. If you can keep up with it, you can understand it. And you don't need to know everything, but enough about it to make it work. You can be so far ahead of everybody. And I think it's important for sales reps to kind of know what's going on, what works and what doesn't. And don't just piss on it because you can't sell it. Advertisers, your customers, are looking for advice. So I think, you know, the RAB's sales certification program, particularly digital sales, is important. Having your radio reps up to speed and trained, not only in radio sales, let's assume that they're in that, but all this other stuff, because the advertisers are asking questions. They're saying, you know, I got a Facebook page. I spent $500 with my nephew to build a great Facebook page, and I have 5 fans, and I see your radio station has 85,000 fans. How do I get that? You know, or you know, I'm with a little electric company in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and this freaking guy from Sparky's, I always have to go and clean up after, yet he's got ads all over the Yellow Pages book, and I see he's doing stuff in social media. He's got a really great website. How's that work for me? And you don't want your radio rep to go, huh? I don't know. We don't do that stuff. Or I can sell you a business card on our website. You know, they really do. If you want to be in the radio business, I think it's a great time to be in it, actually, because change means opportunity. I do think you need to be educated on all this digital stuff adequately, and there are programs. I think the RB certification program is a great one. There are a lot of other great training programs out there, too. I think that's vitally important, to open up the dialogue with advertisers. You can't go in and say, this is what I've got for you this month. How much do you want to buy? You have to go in and say, how's it going? How can I help you? What are your big questions? Where are your budget shifts in advertising? What are you thinking of doing? Talk to me. And unless you have an array of digital products, you're going to be just having to say good luck.
And as any good Jedi knows, make sure to use the Force.
That's right. Bring your wand.
Gordon Borrell is head of Borrell Associates. The report is called The Future of Legacy Media. Gordon, talk for a moment about how to get a copy of the report and also about your conference that's upcoming.
Sure, thanks. Just go to BorrellAssociates.com and you'll see the report up there. You can download the executive summary for free. I'd love to have you become a subscriber. Many of you are, I'm sure. Great report. We did spend an awful lot of time putting this one together, and there's some really cool conclusions in there, too. We even quote George Orwell in the very last line. The conference is March 3rd and 4th. Mark, thanks for mentioning it. We'd love to have you attend. Looks like we'll have a record audience. We had Seth Godin last year. This year we've got Jeff Hazlett, who is the change agent. We've got John Dillay, who's an icon in the radio industry, speaking with our Yoda's panel. We have a panel of 20-somethings, and they're going to get up and say, we don't listen to radio, we don't read newspapers, we don't open a Yellow Pages book, we don't watch regular television. You know, they're going to say that, but let's see what they do and how they consume media and what they think might happen in the future as they get older. And then we have a Yoda's panel, and these guys are going to say, you really ought to listen to them. When we were in the industry, you know, this is what we did, and here's what you should be doing. And I've already interviewed them. They've got some great insights. So we got terrific speakers on, you know, digital ad management. We've got Facebook doing an entire workshop on how to use their tools to build advertising effectiveness for small businesses. And we have a lot of media companies basically selling Facebook pages and things like that. It's the 3rd and 4th of New York. Just Google LOAC 2014. LOAC for Local Online Advertising Conference 2014, and you'll get to the website, or you go to BorrellAssociates.com. It's promoted at the top.
Thank you, Gordon Borrell, for taking the time to do this. Thanks to All Access for co-presenting this with me. I'm Mark Ramsey. Thanks to all of you who are watching this. Thanks also to those of you who dropped questions on Facebook for us. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to them all. Again, we'll be doing more of these in the future, hopefully without technical snafus. Gordon, thanks again so much.
Thanks. I'm going to go back listening to my radio station. See you guys.